Does God exist? We're still on the subject of apologetics, of different issues, and what we've been on for the last couple of weeks has been, does God exist, and giving arguments for and against that people use for the fact of whether God exists. And tonight we're going to be talking about the teleological argument. Now, what is teleological? Now you learned a new word tonight. Teleological definition: exhibiting or relating to design or purpose, especially in nature. So it's relating to design. Does what the things we see on this earth, does it look like it was designed, or does it look like it came about in some other way? Is one way to start with it. And 5 ways I want us to look at, and we'll get through 2 or 3 of them tonight, that scientists openly acknowledge the design in nature. And and then this is the things I listed. We need to figure out who wrote the laws of science. We need to know who created life. We have to figure out a way to explain all of this design in nature. We need to mimic all of the design we see in nature, and then evolutionary design is the last category. So I'm going to use, as I've been using before, I'm going to use quotes from atheists and so on, because I want you to see what they're saying so you can see the arguments for, the arguments against, and so on, rather than using just so many times people say, does God exist? And you say, yes. They say, how do you know? They say, because the Bible says he does. Well, that's fine for some people, but other people it doesn't work very well. But I like us to know, even if we don't know all the reasons, I like us to know that there are scientific reasons behind what we believe. There's more than just what it says in the Bible to show evidence of what we believe. And atheistic philosopher Paul Rickey summed up the teleological argument for the existence of God when he said, now keep in mind this is an atheist, it's true that everything designed has a designer. Everything designed has a designer is an analytically true statement. So he's given us that right off the bat. Consider that in one thing for atheists to provide positive evidences for the existence of design in the universe. But it makes our job easier when, on the theists, it makes it easier for us when atheists admit the same things and naturalists admit the same things that we already know. So when we can have things that they have said, things that they have written that point to the fact to prove our point about the existence of God, I like having those. It says we need to figure out who wrote the laws of science. That's what we're going to talk about first tonight. And we need, because there's, you'll see this as we go. Famous atheist, theoretical physicist, and cosmologist of Cambridge University, Stephen Hawking. Most of you remember Stephen Hawking. He's passed away now. In 2011, he hosted a show on Discovery Channel titled Curiosity: Did God Create the Universe? In that show, he said, the universe is a machine governed by principles or laws that can be understood by the human mind. I believe that the discovery of these laws has been humankind's greatest achievement. But what's really important is that these physical laws, as well as being unchangeable, are universal. Now remember that he said this. These laws that he's talking about, when he's discussing the laws of nature and so on, the laws of the universe, he says they're unchangeable and universal. Okay, that's an atheist saying that. They apply not just to the flight of the ball, but to the motion of a planet and everything else in the universe. Unlike laws made by humans, the laws of nature cannot ever be broken. Now, this is an atheist, okay? That's why they are so powerful. Hawking conceded the point. The universe is a machine governed by principles of laws that are unchangeable, that are universal. He admits all that. This that he has presented is a problem to atheists. People would have you to believe many times it comes down to if you believe in God, you're superstitious. If you believe in science, you're smart. And they try to pit intellect against intellect as to one is superstitious and the other one is intellectual. But when you get into that, when you start studying more of what, for instance, if you all have heard me speak many times, and I've taught many courses and so on, and so you can assume certain things that I know and can assume certain levels of intellect that I have by some of the things I have said. But there's also doubts and things that I have that I might not always share with you. I was amazed when Mother Teresa died, and they found her journal, and she said that at times she had doubts. And the news article I was reading, they were so appalled that Mother Teresa would have doubts. Anybody on the face of this earth who never has doubts, says they never have doubts, they either don't ever think, or they're stupid, or they're lying. It's just that simple, because everybody has doubts, and that's the reason we need to work on our doubts and find out what is true. And the atheistic community is not as monolithic as what people want you to think it is, that they all believe the same thing, they have the same confidence in the same naturalistic things and so on, but you'll find out that they don't. Humanist Martin Gardner explains, imagine that physicists finally discover all the basic waves and their particles and all the basic laws and unite everything in one equation. We can then ask, why that equation? It is fashionable now to conjecture that the Big Bang was caused by a random quantum fluctuation in a vacuum. Okay, now take that, even if you can take that as a fact or not, just he made that statement. It's devoid of space and time, but of course such a vacuum is a far cry from nothing. In other words, even a vacuum is not nothing. A vacuum is something. Everything is something. And so what he's getting at here is, where's our starting point? Where can we start with what we believed as the naturalistic teachings? He says there had to be quantum laws to fluctuate. And why are there quantum laws? There is no escape from the super ultimate questions. Why is there something rather than nothing? And why is the something structured the way it is? So here is a thinking man who's thinking this out. He's an atheist, and he's thinking, but he's reasoning out and saying there's something here that we're not quite able to put a handle on from a naturalistic standpoint. And what is it? He said there had to be laws in effect before anything came about, or the things that came about would not have come about. Isn't that true? There had to be something there. There had to be an intellect. I'll put it that way. There had to be intellect on some level in existence for everything to come into being, even if we believed it was random and it was evolutionary. Even if Big Bang cosmology were correct, you still can't have a law without having a law writer. So if you're going to assume that there were laws that existed before anything of life or matter existed, then you have to say, well, where did the law come from? So when you're reasoning back on this, the evolutionists try to put our back against the wall, when really their backs are against the wall, because everything they do pushes it back another level. And if you have laws that have always been here, where did they come from? If they came from somewhere, who was the one that created the laws? This might be a little simplistic, but when scientists say, is there a possibility of life on such and such a planet? What they do is measure oxygen, water, all the things that we need. How do we know that there's not a universe somewhere way out where nobody's ever seen that has a planet like Earth, except the human type beings that are on that earth don't breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide. They do the opposite. They breathe in carbon dioxide, and that feeds them, and they breathe out oxygen. Because on earth, we breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide. Plants breathe in the carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen. So we're in a constant loop of creating oxygen and carbon dioxide. And when they talk about CO2s, they say we need to get the CO2s out of our atmosphere. If you did, all the plants would die. You can't get rid of the CO2s because it's a necessary building block in the life of plants. How could a law of nature just come into being out of randomness? In other words, how could these laws be just on their own? They could just happen. Think about the odds against that. In Curiosity, Did God Create the Universe? Hawking boldly claimed that everything in the universe can be accounted for through science without the need of God. Now, he makes that statement. Okay, let's follow through here. Notice that Hawking did not even believe that assertion himself. He said, did God create the quantum laws that allowed the Big Bang to occur? In a nutshell, did we need a God to set it all up so that the Big Bang could bang? So he questioned himself. This is a quote from him. He's questioning his own science and what he believes by saying, well, we have laws here. If we have laws here, where did they come from? If you have laws, normally you have a lawgiver. If you have a lawgiver, who is the lawgiver? Where did that come from? And so he's reasoning this out, but I never heard him make a confession or profession to believe in God of any kind before he died. I hope he did. The eminent atheistic theoretical physicist, cosmologist, and astrobiologist of Arizona State University, you like that title, Paul Davies, noted Hawking's sidestep of that question in the roundtable discussion on the Discovery Channel following Curiosity, titled The Creation Question, a Curiosity Conversation. Concerning Hawking, Davies said, in the show, Stephen Hawking gets very, very close to saying, well, where did the laws of physics come from? That's where we might find some sort of God. And then he backs away and doesn't return to the subject. You need to know where those laws come from. That's where the mystery lies, the laws. So he said, Hawking takes us up to that, and Hawking purported to say in a particular paper, a particular book, that he could show you how something came from nothing. But when you read the entire paper, the entire book, he doesn't. Nowhere in there does he? Over and over in the scientific literature, Davies highlights this gaping chasm in the naturalistic or the naturalist model, regularly highlighting the necessity of universal law writer. Writing in New Scientist, Davies said, how did stupid atoms spontaneously write their own software? That's a pretty good question, isn't it? We have these, supposedly we came from one cell creatures and then began to split and create new life and create more life and so on. Can you imagine an amoeba writing a law code? Their level of thinking is not even high enough to think that far. Can you think of any animal, the most intelligent animal in the world, that could write a law code? None at all. Human beings are the only ones that can even think about it. We're the only ones that even ponder that. I guarantee you there's not chimpanzees over in Africa sitting there wondering, I wonder where life started. I guarantee they're not. They don't reason that out. In the New York Times, Davies, and we're going to stick with him for just a minute, he said this, where do these laws come from and why did they have the form that they have? Not only where do they come from, but why do they have the form that they have? When I was a student, now here he's making a confession, when I was a student, the laws of physics were regarded as completely off limits. The job of the scientist, we were told, is to discover the laws and apply them, not inquire into their provenance. The laws were treated as given, imprinted on the universe like a marker's mark at the moment of cosmic birth. You see what he's getting at there? They were told, don't even ask that question. Don't question that. And you know one of the reasons I think they say don't question that? They have no way of answering the question. If you don't answer a question, you say that's not a proper question. And fixed forever. Over the years, I have often asked my physicist colleagues why the laws of physics are what they are. Now listen to this. Listen to what he says here. The answers vary from, that's not a scientific question, to, nobody knows. The favorite reply is, there is no reason they are what they are. They just are. There's no reason. Now here they are coming up since the age of reason, especially back in the 18th century. Since the age of reason, they've been coming up with reasons for and how to reason this out and how to intellectually come up with all these things and figure these things out. And he says there, they just are. The idea that laws exist reasonlessly is deeply anti-rational. Now he's saying that, this is an atheist saying that, not me. After all, the very essence of a scientific explanation of some phenomenon is that the world is ordered logically. Think about the balance we have in this world for us to just be able to stay here, for me to stand here and you all to sit here. If the earth was traveling faster, it would throw us all off. If gravity was a little weaker, we'd all float off into space. There's any number of, if our atmosphere was not like it is, we'd all burn up or we'd all freeze or we'd die from lack of oxygen. There's so many things that are perfect on this planet in order for life to be here like we know it. If one traces these reasons all the way down to the bedrock of reality, the laws of physics, only to find that reason then it deserts us, it makes a mockery of science. Here's an atheist admitting this now. Can the mighty edifice of physical order be perceived in the world about us ultimately be rooted in reasonless absurdity? If so, then nature is a fiendishly clever bit of trickery. Meaninglessness and absurdity somehow masquerading as ingenious order and rationality. Clearly then, now get this statement, this is important, and I've used this talking with atheists before. Clearly then, both religion and science are founded on faith. It's founded on faith. I remember when I was having a discussion with a group of atheists, and I said, okay, I accept God by faith. I have reasons to believe He exists. I said, but I accept Him by faith, accept who Jesus Christ is by faith. I said, you accept naturalistic evolution by faith. They said, no, it's science. I said, no, it's faith. They said, no, it's science. I said, well, I'll give you an example. I said, where did it all start? Where did the first matter and energy and intellect come from? Now, there was like 4 or 5 of these guys there. They didn't say a word. I said, well, now you need to tell me something. I said, well, let me give you this. We'll say the Big Bang has happened. Okay? Now give me the next step. What comes next? Not one word. I said, let's say after the Big Bang, Earth formed and its atmosphere was formed, and I'll give you a one-cell organism on this planet. How did it become the life that we have today? They had no answer. I said, well, let's say we had fish. And I'll give you that. We had fish. How did fish get up on land and become mammals and begin to breathe oxygen? And then how did man come from these animals? They had no answer. I said, so you've just proven to me that you accept evolution by faith. They said, no, it's science. I said, well, you didn't give me any of your science. Not a one here. I said, I know more about the theory of evolution than all of you put together, and I believe in God. And because they couldn't admit, but he saw it here. Clearly then, both religion and science are founded on faith. In other words, you have to take certain things by faith to believe anything. There's no scientist in the world that knows every scientific theory there is and every evidence from physics right on through to biology and everything. No, there's no scientist today that knows all of these things, and it'd take a huge group of scientists to get together to know all of them. And then what they know as science might change tomorrow. namely on belief in the existence of something outside the universe like an unexplained God or an unexplained set of physical laws. In other words, he's saying, you fellas, listen, you're going to have to start here on faith somewhere. Whether you say it's God or whether you say it's a physical law that was here, you're going to have to admit this is faith. This is what you're going with. In conclusion, Davies highlighted the fact that naturalists have a blind faith when assuming that the laws of science could create themselves free from an external agency. Until science, and this is his quote, until science comes up with a testable theory of the laws of the universe, its claim to be free of faith is manifestly bogus. Now, this is not Billy Graham. This is an atheistic scientist that is making this statement. 2016, Davies reiterated, the ballyhoo about a universe popping out of the vacuum is a complete red herring. It just dodges the real issue, which is the prior existence of the laws of physics. Okay, so we ask the question, did matter start first, or were there laws of physics in place that brought about the matter and the energy and the intellect? It's the chicken and the egg question. Which one came first? Because one or the other had to, and you would think that the laws of physics would have had to been in place. If there was no law of gravity, then everybody would float. And there's no telling where you'd start. In fact, we'd all die because we'd float until we ran out of oxygen. But he understands here there had to be something there prior. And increasingly, now I like this one, so I wanted to put this in here. Increasingly popular theory that they have come up with to explain all this is something called the multiverse. Have you ever heard of the multiverse? Okay. Definition. The multiverse is a hypothetical, don't forget that word, hypothetical group of multiple universes. In other words, there's loads of universes all out through the eons that we don't know anything about. Could that be true? I don't have any idea. Who knows? But they've never seen one. But anyway, together these universes comprise everything that exists. The entirety of space, time, matter, energy, information, and the physical laws and constants that describe them. The different universes within the multiverse are called parallel universes, other universes, alternate universes, or many worlds. That's the multiverse. Why did they need a multiverse? Why did they come up with that theory? What led them that? What got them to the position where they had to come up with that? And I'll ask this. Do you remember a few years back when they found this rock that they said was from Mars? Oh, yeah. It was on all the, and they were very interested in it. The scientists were excited about it. Well, if I forget to tell you why they were so excited when I get through here, if we don't have it, ask me, and I'll tell you why they're so excited. Does the multiverse theory answer the question as to the origin of natural laws? Okay. They use it because they can't come up with something here. They say, well, it's the multiverse is what their theory is. And there's so many universes out here in so many different places that life could have started somewhere else on one of these universes in this multiverse that we have. People ask me from time to time, and I've said this to some of you, they ask me, do you think there's life on other planets? I said, I don't know. Do you think there's other universes? I said, I don't know. And they say, if there is, why doesn't the Bible say anything about it? I said, because the Bible is written for human beings on earth, not for Martians or people on Saturn or people in some other universe somewhere else. It was written for us. Why would God have a book written to tell us all about people on all other planets and not tell us what we need to know for us to live here? It doesn't make sense. But anyway, Sebastian Anthony, he says, evidence is mounting that we are all Martians. Now we're talking about scientists here. This is not science fiction writers. This is scientists. And I want you to see where they're reaching here. Evidence is mounting that we are all Martians. I bet you didn't know that. When you came here tonight, you didn't know you were a Martian, did you? According to new research presented at the annual Goldsmith Geochemistry Conference in Florence, there is compelling evidence that life on Earth was kick-started by a meteorite from Mars bearing simple RNA-based organisms. So, life sprung up on Mars, and it was seeded here by a meteorite. But just now so do you see why that Mars rock when they were looking at it, they said it looked like it could have been elements of life that was fossilized in this. Well, you see, they have not been able to find anywhere on this world through all the years that they've been working on the theory of evolution and naturalism. They have not yet to find where life began on this earth. They haven't been able to find any place where life originated. They can tell you where certain things happen. They say, well, man first sprang onto the scene at this place, and then I've changed it to where it's overnight it's this place, and next year it'll be over in this place where it came from. And they'll tell you all those things, but not one of them can tell you where it started. They've been studying and trying their best to find it out. They even tried to make life, artificial life, in laboratories. Back in the 50s and 60s, they were trying to come up with ways because they had to figure out some way, because they knew the theory of evolution has to be right. It has to be true. And if it has to be true, then we have to find where this life started. And they haven't been able to. So now they find signs of life on Mars. Now, if life evolved from a creature from Mars, then we can't prove that's not true until we get to Mars. So what have they done? They've taken a problem they couldn't solve and pushed it off all the way off the Earth up to Mars. And from there to the multiverse. Furthermore, the same research also indicates that the ancient primordial surface of Earth would have been inhospitable to the formation of the building blocks of life, RNA, DNA, and proteins. In other words, they're saying the way that they know, what they'll say they know, but they don't, they think, the way that the atmosphere was, the way everything was here, and they refer to it as the primordial surface of Earth, you couldn't have come up with RNA and DNA in that, so it must have come from some other planet and implanted here. Must have. Therefore, the only way that life could have begun more than 3 billion years ago is if it arrived here from Mars. Now, this is a person that graduated from high school, that graduated from college, that probably has a doctorate, and he's making these statements. Astrophysicist and science writer for New Scientist, Marcus Cohn, wrote, "If the universe owes its origins to the quantum theory, then quantum theory must have existed before the universe." Okay, he's saying that, look, if quantum theory is what accounts for life here and the Earth being here, then this had to have existed before all this existed, before the universe existed. So that I like to talk about everything in our universe started out in a singularity, in a highly dense, compact little ball, we'll say. I'm going to describe it that way. And it exploded out of that, and that created everything that we have. Now, which is easier to believe, Superman or that? I mean, you're grasping there. I'm not trying to make fun of them. I just want to see where we are. So the next question is surely, where did the laws of quantum theory come from? We do not know. Did you get that? We do not know. So if you have somebody tell you, well, we know science proves we're all, said, okay, tell me. Just point me where I need, show me the document I need to read, show me where the literature is. Valenkin here said, I consider that an entirely different question. So he just skirts it all together. University of Oxford physicist David Deutsch said, Even if the answer to why there is something rather than nothing were because of how quantum field theory works, the question would become, why are the laws of quantum field theory as they are? In other words, if it came from that, why are those laws in place? Why do they operate the way they do? Why do they act the way they do? How could that have come about by just chance? Or did that have to be created in itself? Lawrence Krauss of Arizona State University. Krauss argues in his book, A Universe from Nothing, that physics has ultimately answered the question of why there is something rather than nothing. Okay, he makes the statement that it's answered it. Okay. Cosmologist George F.R. Ellis at the University of Cape Town. Above all, Krauss, now he's talking about the guy we just talked about here. Above all, Krauss does not address why the laws of physics exist, why they have the form they have, or in what kind of manifestation they existed before the universe existed, which he must believe if he believes they brought the universe into existence. So he's saying, this guy is saying, this explains this, and this is where it goes to, but it doesn't tell you. It doesn't tell you anything. He dodges all around the question and answers questions you haven't asked. When trying to explain where it all came from, naturalists raise more questions than they answer, because it always pushes it back further. If you talk to a naturalist, I don't care how many degrees they have, you say, well, where on earth did the first life begin? And they'll tell all kinds, come up with all kinds of things, but they won't answer your question because they don't know. It would be easier if they just said, we don't know. We don't know. If somebody asked me a question I don't know, used to I'd try to figure out how to answer their question, and now I just say, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I can find out, but I don't know. But they hate to do that. Quantum physicist Michael Brooks agreed with Ellis in his criticism of Krauss's book. Writing in New Scientist, he said, now this is atheists arguing with atheists about where things began. Okay, this is not Christians or Muslims or Hindus arguing with atheists. This is atheists arguing among themselves. The laws of physics can't be conjured from nothing. Krauss contends that the multiverse makes the question of what determined our laws of nature less significant. Okay, Krauss has taken this conjured up theory of a multiverse that they have no evidence for anyway, and he accepts that as a fact. He says, Krauss contends that the multiverse makes the question of what determined our laws of nature less significant. Because you have a fictional thing that you have come up with, it makes this less significant. Truthfully, it just puts the question beyond science, for now at least. In other words, he's admitting, Michael Brooks is admitting, this is beyond science. We can't come up with an answer to that, haven't been able to, beyond what we can even do. In his book, The Grand Design, Hawking tried to submit a way that the universe could have created itself from nothing without God and still be in keeping with the laws of nature. An impossible concept, to be sure. He said, now get this one. This is what Hawking said, one of the most brilliant physicists of the 20th century. He says, because there is a law like gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing. Did he answer the question? He said, just because there's a law like gravity, the universe, where'd the law come from, Stephen? Who put the law in place? Who wrote the design? Who got it here? It just came from, he says, just because we have gravity, it proves that everything could come from nothing. Does that answer anybody's question? That's what I ran into when I was checking to see what he had written many years ago about how he was going to explain. He said he was going to explain how something came from nothing, and when he was finished, he never explained anything. Professor of mathematics and fellow in mathematics. Now, this is John Lennox. He's passed away now. He's a brilliant mathematician and a Christian. He's a believer, or was a believer. Well, he's still a believer. He's in heaven now, so he's a believer in heaven. But look at his title, Professor of Mathematics and Fellow in Mathematics and the Philosophy of Science at Oxford University, John Lennox. I would say he might know something. He said, Hawking's argument appears to me even more illogical when he says the existence of gravity means the creation of the universe was inevitable. In other words, just because there was gravity, all the rest of it was inevitable. But how did gravity exist in the first place? Who put it there? And what was the creative force behind its birth? And what's the naturalist answer to all that? Silence. Next, we need to know who created life. If there is life, you need to know where it came from. Would that be an obvious thing? Richard Dawkins. I don't mean to pick on him. It's just I run across a lot of his quotes. I've mentioned to him most of these that we've done. It could be that at some... Now listen to how he says this. It could be. Now this is supposed to be a foremost authority on evolutionary theory. He says it could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means to a very, very high level of technology and designed a form of life that they seeded into perhaps this planet. Now that is a possibility and an intriguing possibility. I suppose it's possible you might find evidence for that. What? Is there not? I heard him make this statement. I heard him when he made this statement. I thought, you just told nobody. You didn't tell us anything. This maybe, probably, could be. There's a chance, and all this. You think this is science? This is the science that when I was discussing with these 4 or 5 gentlemen that said they believed in the theory of evolution and they believed in natural selection, they believed in all this, and they couldn't tell me anything about their own theory, but yet they said it was not faith. And here we have Richard Dawkins said maybe, possibly, could be, who knows? Ultimately, since there's no evidence for the existence of aliens, there can hardly be any evidence for their establishing life on Earth. We haven't even proven if there's aliens anyway. We haven't proven if there's anybody living on another planet. Such an idea, therefore, can hardly be in harmony with the evolutionists' own beliefs that the importance of direct observation and experiment in science. In other words, they believe that you can experiment with it, you can observe. That's what you do with science. Well, if you can't observe it and you can't experiment with it, how can you prove it's science? How can you prove it's law? When we say that God created all that there is, we put it out of the reach of the scientific experimentation and therefore cannot prove that God exists. And that's true. We can't unequivocally, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that God exists. We can't prove that. We can know that, but we can't prove that with physical means. That may be true, but the same is true when one makes claims of life originating on Mars or somewhere else in the multiverse. Isn't that true? Notice that since aliens are beings of nature, they too must be governed by the laws of nature. So here we are, we're taking it back from here, and we got the same question and the same doubts and the same things you have to prove on Mars. If life started on Mars, how did it start on Mars? Where did the laws come from? Where are the laws where are the laws of nature that had life to spring up there? Well, they want to kind of push it off because they know we're not going to be on Mars for a few years yet. And we hadn't brought enough stuff back or studied enough stuff to find out yet, so they can push it off a little further. Well, once they find out they cannot find a place where life started on Mars, then's when they reach out into the multiverse that they don't even know if it exists or not. So they just keep pushing it back and pushing it back and pushing it back. Recall Hawking's claim the laws of physics are universal. They apply not just to the flight of the ball, but to the motion of a planet and everything else in the universe. Evolutionary physicist Victor Stenger submitted his belief that the basic laws of science hold true in the most distant observed galaxy and in the cosmic microwave background, implying that these laws have been valid for over 13 billion years. So even he's saying these laws existed for 13 billion years. No, we don't know. We don't have any idea. That's a fanciful guess at best. Okay, let's wind it down here. We have to figure out a way to explain all of this design in nature. So, Bernard Carr of Queen Mary University in London. A supernatural option of some sort is demanded. He says demanded. He warned cosmologists to accept the inevitable implications of the evidence. If you don't want God, you'd better have a multiverse. If you don't want God, you better have something to replace him and replace what he did. Why are physicists so keen on having a multiverse? Why is it? Why is it they feel like they come up with this theory, this off-the-wall theory, and I don't know if there's a bunch of more universes out there, don't have any idea. Was God on vacation before he created the earth? So we don't know what all God has created and what he put into being. We don't have the foggiest idea. But why are they so keen on a multiverse? It's because that way you can push it off further. Instead of having to answer the question, you can push it off further. Well, out here in the multiverse is where it started. First, it's out here on Mars is where life started. If we can ever get to Mars, we can figure it out then. Then when you can't figure it out from there, well, it's out here in the multiverse. Well, they know that you can't visit. If the multiverse is true, there's no way in the world you could visit every multiverse there is out there when you can't even see them with a telescope. Most powerful telescopes they have. Lee Smolin said, "We had to invent the multiverse, and according to Lawson Parker, writing in National Geographic, it arose from our imagination." Well, there's an honest fella. It arose from our imagination. We just came up with it. Now, this Smithsonian magazine. If the multiverse exists, the life-hosting capability of our particular universe isn't such a mystery. So it's not such a mystery if the multiverse exists. An infinite number of less hospitable universes also exist. Well, if there's a universe like ours that's hospitable to human beings existing, then there's bound to be some others out there somewhere. An infinite number of less hospitable universes also exist. The composition of ours then would just be a happy coincidence. But we don't know that until scientists can validate the multiverse. Now he's getting down to the meat of it. He says, we can't even prove there's a multiverse. And how they will do that, and if it is even possible to do that, remains an open question. So he's saying, I don't know if they'll ever be able to prove that the multiverse exists. Davies, we'll go back to him, he put it, clearly then, both religion and science are founded on faith, namely on belief in the existence of something outside the universe, like an unexplained God or an unexplained set of physical laws, maybe even a huge ensemble of unseen universes too. Maybe? I hear a lot of maybes in their talk. I don't hear much science in what they're saying. According to Smolin, everything we know suggests that the universe is unusual. It is flatter, smoother, larger, and emptier than a typical universe predicted by the known laws of physics. In other words, the universe we have just doesn't make sense according to physics. That's my way of putting it. If we reached into a hat filled with pieces of paper, each with the specifications of a possible universe written on it, it is exceedingly unlikely that we would get a universe anything like ours in one pick or even a billion. And that's what we're talking about when you leave it to chance. It's like if I had a lottery ticket that I had already checked and it wins $1 billion. And so I'm going to put it in a big container and stir it all up and let all of you pick one out. And there's a billion pieces of paper in there. What's the odds you're going to find it? Well, that's what they're talking about with naturalistic evolution is it just happened to happen this way at a particular time, at the right time. It just happened to happen when they had an atmosphere that would support life. It just happened to happen, and there are physical laws out there that cause this to be, and we can study those physical laws, but we don't know where the physical laws came from, and we don't know how the physical laws got there. Were they created by something somewhere else? Was it some? So in other words, there's so much when if you go to any public school in this nation and pick up a biology book, it'll talk about the truth of evolution and everything coming from nothing. But none of them have any proof or any evidence that it did. And it's being taught at our cost, taxpayer dollars, on all the schools. It's like, and I've mentioned this before, when we went to the aquarium back years ago down at Fort Fisher, and it had a model of a whale up there, and it had the sign there. It says, the whale evolved from the elephant. It was a statement. This was a statement. Now, if it had said, according to the theory of evolution, whales came from elephants. If they'd have said that, then I'd say, well, you're saying according to, so you're, but they stated it as a fact. This is what happened. So now let's just follow this through just a minute. How big an elephant is, how big a whale is. And whales came from elephants. Well, how did elephants get there? Where do evolutionists say life started on this planet? In the water. In the water. And then as these evolved into fish, and some of the fish, because they found lungfish that use their flippers like feet and crawl up on the shore, they said that's the proof of evolution. So let's take their theory here, what they're saying and what that sign said that was supposed to be a scientific fact. Life started in the water, in the ocean, and then it slowly evolved and came up on Earth. And then mammals evolved out of that, who evolved into elephants, and then this elephant evolved back into a whale that's in the ocean. Does that sound believable? I'm not making fun of their theory. I'm just saying, if you put up there on that sign, that's paid. This museum is paid for by our tax dollars, and it says the whale evolved from the elephant. It was a statement, wasn't it, Diana? It didn't say, it didn't frame it as according to the theory of evolution or not. It didn't say it. It said just, this is what happened. No, that's not what happened. And even if it did, you don't have any evidence that it did.
According to that, they should have said the whale evolved into the elephant.
Well, you see, that's the way it started with, but then you get the elephant back. He evolved from a single cell organism in the ocean to a huge elephant on the land, and then evolved back into a whale out in the ocean. And one of the first things that popped in my mind when I read that sign was, I said, elephant has a long trunk. That's his nose. He has two nostrils in there. And somehow through evolution, that evolved and got up on top of his head and made a porthole in the top of his head. Do you know how many steps of evolution that would take? Was it at one time where he had a trunk and a little hole up here? It's fantasy. Even if some of it was, even if you could prove that to be true, that still wouldn't do away with the existence of God. But they used that theory to prove that God does not exist because life could happen without him. That's the problem. Lind and Discover magazine. We have a lot of really, really strange coincidences. And all these coincidences are such that they make life possible. So everything's just a coincidence. We have a lot of them. All these coincidences made life. Mary Jane Rubenstein, whichever she pronounced it, writing in New Scientist, said, "Here is the dilemma. If the universe began with a quantum particle blipping into existence, inflating godlessly into space-time and a whole zoo of material, then why is it so well suited for life? This stuff that just happened, why is it so well suited for life?" For medieval philosophers, the purported perfection of the universe was the key to proving the existence of God. And the early scientists back in the Renaissance and periods back in the past, when you came up with people like Francis Bacon, Newton, that came up with the theory of gravity, so on, all of them, they believed in God, and they just wanted to see how the things work. And that's what but they could go by a set of laws that were in place because they accepted the fact that God created these laws to begin with. Was the key to proving the existence of God. The universe is so fit for intelligent life that it must be the product of a powerful, benevolent, external deity. Must be. Any questions or comments? We'll stop with that. It's all by chance. It just happened to be here and happened to be here at the right time and at the right place and have the right atmosphere and the right food and the right everything that you have. All you have to know about scientific theory is that when I was going to school in the 1960s, they were talking about the earth was going to get cold and everything was going to freeze. Now what is it? The earth is warming. They've gone from the top scientists were the ones that I was reading about back in the 60s. Now the top scientists today said everything's getting hotter. And the truth is, they don't know. They don't know. They said if you get X amount of population on the earth, there'll be mass starvation. We have 7 or 8 billion people on the earth today, and we have less starvation than we've ever had in written history. They don't know as much as they think they do. Any questions or comments?